In a small, crowded gym buzzing with restless students and flashing cameras, an old man sat quietly in the back row unnoticed. His name was Robert Langston, a soldier who'd carried the weight of wars and the lives of men across minefields, his worn jacket hiding scars and stories no one bothered to ask about. With a faded eagle patch on his sleeve and a carefully typed speech tucked under his arm, he wasn't here for applause, just to share a truth about sacrifice. But when the world overlooked him, someone who knew his worth was about to remind everyone, true heroes don't demand a stage, they earn it. This is the story of a man whose silence spoke louder than any spotlight ever could. Robert Langston arrived at the school gymnasium well before the scheduled start, his shoes gleaming with a fresh polish, his brown jacket meticulously pressed, and a blue folder tucked under his arm. The principal, clipboard in hand, barely spared him a glance before delivering the news. "I'm sorry, Mr. Langston," she said, her tone clipped but polite. "We've gone with someone younger for the Veterans Day speech, someone the students might find more relatable." Robert's face remained impassive. He gave a single nod, no trace of protest in his expression, and accepted the folding chair offered to him in the back row. No name tag, no acknowledgement, just a quiet place among the crowd. He settled in, the chair creaking faintly under his weight, and rested his cane across his knees, the blue folder balanced neatly atop them. The gym buzzed with the low hum of anticipation. Red, white, and blue banners hung slightly askew above a makeshift stage, their colors vibrant against the scuffed walls. The air carried the faint scent of floor polish mingled with the metallic tang of folding chairs. Students shuffled in, some whispering to each other, others glued to their phone screens, barely noticing the elderly man seated at the edge of the crowd. Robert Langston, a name unknown to them, had served 28 years in the military, training countless officers and performing acts of quiet heroism that never made headlines. In his folder was a speech he'd typed himself, simple, unadorned words about service, sacrifice, and the weight of coming home. He'd attended every Veterans Day event for decades, but today he was just another face in the room. Teachers herded students into their assigned rows, their voices sharp but patient. The loudspeaker crackled to life, announcing, "Veterans Day Assembly will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats." Robert's eyes swept the room, not with resentment, but with the steady observation of someone who'd seen far more than this small moment. Across the gym, beneath a banner proclaiming the school's mission, the chosen speaker stood tall, posing for photographs. Captain Sanderson, young and polished, wore his Medal of Honor prominently on his dress uniform. Reporters circled him, their cameras flashing, capturing every angle of his confident smile. A teacher passing by Robert offered a quick, well-meaning grin. "Glad you could make it, sir," she said, not pausing for his response before moving on. Robert's gaze dropped to his shoes, their shine dulled by years of wear. The patch on his jacket sleeve, once bold, had faded to a ghostly outline of an eagle, a remnant of his time with the Airborne Division. A student nearby leaned toward his friend and muttered, "Is that guy one of the speakers?" The other shook his head. "Nah, probably just someone's grandpa." Robert overheard but didn't react. Instead, he reached into his pocket, his fingers finding a small, bronze challenge coin, dented and worn, etched with 5 numbers and 2 letters, a token issued only to him, a singular mark of his service. He rubbed it slowly, the gesture grounding him as the gym's noise swirled around him. The microphone at the front of the gym clicked on, and the principal's voice boomed. "Good morning, students." Robert sat a little straighter, not out of pride but from habit, knowing what was coming even if no one else did. The lights dimmed, and a tinny, slightly off-key rendition of the national anthem played through the speakers. On stage, a group of student dancers moved in sync, waving red, white, and blue scarves in a choreographed flag routine. Parents in the audience clapped politely, their phones raised to capture the moment. Robert remained still, his mind drifting to other flags, ones lowered over caskets, folded with precision, and handed to grieving families who were only beginning to understand their loss. The principal returned to the microphone, her voice warm with enthusiasm. "Thank you for joining us for our annual Veterans Day Assembly. It's our great honor to introduce our distinguished guest, Captain Sanderson, who has appeared on national television and was recently featured in American Valor magazine. He'll share his remarkable story with us today. The room erupted in applause, louder from the teachers than the students. Cameras clicked as Captain Sanderson stood, his uniform crisp, his presence commanding. Robert blinked once, his expression unreadable. He didn't know the young captain, who likely hadn't even been born during Robert's final tour. A student nearby whispered to another, "Didn't that old guy sign up to speak too?" The other replied, "Yeah, but they went with someone better." Robert didn't turn to look. His hand rested on the blue folder, his thumb gently tracing the creased corner, as if anchoring himself to the words he'd prepared but wouldn't deliver. Outside in the staff parking lot behind the school cafeteria, Colonel Raymond Cade, retired, stood watching a live stream of the assembly on his phone. He'd come to see his granddaughter in the front row, expecting a heartfelt tribute to service, not a polished spectacle. When the camera panned across the gym and lingered briefly on Robert Langston, seated unnoticed in the back, Raymond's jaw tightened. "They didn't let him speak," he muttered, disbelief lacing his voice. Unbelievable. He pulled up a contact labeled simply "Command" and dialed. The call connected after one ring. "Go ahead," said the voice on the other end. Raymond's words were sharp and direct. "Langston's here. They stuck him in the back row. Principal said he wasn't the right fit." A pause, then the voice responded, calm but firm. "What's the location?" "East Ridge High School, gym. It's already started." Another pause. "If he won't speak for himself, we'll do it for him. Tell them to hold the final anthem until we arrive." Raymond nodded, ending the call without another word. He glanced at the school building, where the assembly was winding down. Inside, it was all ceremony. Outside, something authentic was about to unfold. Captain Sanderson was midway through his speech, his voice clear and rehearsed. "In basic training, I learned that service isn't about glory. It's about honor and showing up when it matters most." Polite applause followed, parents leaning forward in their seats, students offering half-hearted nods. The speech was smooth, every word crafted as if for a teleprompter. Robert sat quietly, the edge of his folder now slightly curled under his hand. On stage, the principal beamed, and another photo was snapped for the local paper. A reporter scribbled notes, capturing the moment for tomorrow's headline. Then the gym doors creaked open. The sound was subtle at first, but it cut through the hum of the room like a gust of cold air. Heavy boots echoed on the polished floor. First one pair, then three more. A four-star general entered, his dress uniform adorned with rows of ribbons, flanked by two aides and a Navy chief. No one had announced their arrival. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the back of the gym, where Robert Langston sat, unnoticed until now. The gym fell silent, every sound swallowed by an unseen weight. Captain Chase Sanderson, mid-sentence on the stage, froze, his polished words hanging unfinished. The principal, her brow furrowed, stepped forward, clutching the edge of her blazer. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp with confusion. "This part of the assembly is—" But the four-star general, his presence commanding the room, didn't glance her way. He strode down the center aisle, his polished boots clicking against the polished floor. Students, seated in neat rows, rose instinctively as he passed, their phones slipping from their hands, their whispers fading. Something unspoken had shifted the air. At the back of the gym, the general stopped and turned, his gaze steady. "Mr. Langston," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority, "would you join me for a moment?" Every head swiveled. Robert Langston, seated in the last row, looked up from the blue folder he held. His face betrayed no surprise, no pride. Slowly he stood, tucking the folder under his arm with the deliberate care of someone who had carried far heavier burdens. The principal tried again, her voice faltering. "But we already have a speaker." The general turned to her, his eyes unwavering. "You chose a speaker," he said. "I'm here to introduce a soldier." He climbed onto the stage, the echo of his steps filling the hushed gym. No notes, no adjustments to the microphone. He simply stood, letting the silence settle over the students, teachers, and janitorial staff like a heavy fog. It wasn't for show, it was for meaning. "I was told this morning," he began, his voice steady, "that this assembly would honor service. He glanced at the principal, who stood rigid beside Captain Sanderson, then back to the crowd. But someone mistook service for spotlight. His gaze shifted to the back row. So let me introduce a man who never needed a stage to lead. Robert walked forward, his steps measured, no music or fanfare to mark his path, just the quiet rhythm of his shoes and the weight of 100 pairs of eyes. The general continued, his voice clear. This man trained 3 of my commanding officers. He led my first deployment through terrain so hostile it haunts me still. He carried wounded soldiers across a minefield, bleeding himself, and stayed behind to cover their evacuation alone. The students sat taller now, their slouches gone. The air in the gym felt denser, more real. When we were young, we read about heroes and stories, the general said. I served beside one, and this morning you gave him a folding chair. The principal's face drained of color. Captain Sanderson stepped back, his posture respectful. The general moved aside, leaving space for Robert to stand beside him. You don't have to speak, Sergeant Major, he said. Your actions have spoken for you. Every day you showed up when no one was watching. Robert stood silent, his expression unchanged, but a murmur stirred in the crowd. It grew into a wave, students rising row by row, teachers joining, even the janitorial staff stepping forward from the shadows of the back hallway. No one was told to stand. They simply did, honoring a man who had never asked for it, a man who had given more than words could ever capture. The gym held its breath, the silence electric, as if everyone had just realized they'd overlooked something profound. A teacher whispered to another, Langston? That name rings a bell. In the third row, a student leaned toward a friend. My uncle's in the Army, and he told me about a guy named Langston once. Said he saved an entire unit in Kandahar. The whisper spread, soft but persistent, like ripples across a still pond. The general stepped forward again. Let me tell you about Sergeant Major Robert Langston. He wasn't the loudest voice in any room, but when he spoke, everyone listened. He didn't earn medals because he chased them. He earned them because his men wouldn't let his sacrifices go unnoticed. A memory flickered, vivid and raw. Smoke choked the air, gunfire cracked in the distance. A convoy lay in ruins, shredded by roadside bombs. Robert dragged 2 wounded soldiers behind a smoldering truck, one screaming, the other limp, barely breathing. The radio buzzed with static. We need cover fire. Someone has to hold them off. Robert didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fallen rifle, slung both men over his shoulders, and ran, his knee torn and one ear deafened by an explosion. 12 kilometers he walked, alone to the extraction point. He didn't ask for medals or recognition. He just wanted his team safe. Back in the gym, Robert's gaze fell to the folder still tucked under his arm. The general's voice softened. That folder holds the speech he used to give at small-town schools across this state until someone decided he wasn't relatable enough. The room stayed quiet, no cheers, just a heavy stillness. The principal's head dipped slightly, her eyes avoiding the crowd. A few teachers looked away, uncomfortable. Then, in the front row, a girl stood. She was young, her denim jacket adorned with a small army pin on the collar. She clapped once, then again, her hands steady. Within moments, the room joined her. Not a roar, not a frenzy, but a slow, deliberate clap, the kind that carries meaning without noise. Robert didn't bow or smile. He simply looked out at the students, teachers, janitors, and the general, offering a single nod that seemed to say, "This was never about me." The applause faded, not from indifference, but from a shared reluctance to shatter the moment. Robert turned to the general, giving a quiet nod of gratitude. The general placed a hand over his heart in return. The principal stepped forward, gripping the microphone tightly. Her voice, when it came, was softer, less certain. "Sergeant Major Langston," she said, "I'd be honored if you'd return next year, not as a guest, but as our keynote speaker." Robert didn't respond. He didn't need to. Instead, he opened his blue folder, revealing neatly typed pages with handwritten notes scrawled in the margins. He handed them to a student nearby, a boy with braces and shaking hands. "You read it," Robert said gently. "This day is for you, not me." The boy took the pages as if they were fragile, something to be revered. As the crowd began to file out of the gym, Several students paused to shake Robert's hand. A girl hugged him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. A janitor, lingering near the door, whispered, "Thank you." Captain Sanderson offered a crisp salute, this time with a sincerity that hadn't been there before. Near the exit, a student turned to a friend. "Why didn't he tell anyone who he was?" The general, overhearing, answered without looking back, "Because those who've truly lived it don't need to." Robert walked back to where he'd been seated, but the folding chair was gone. In its place stood a proper seat, padded, wooden, with a small plaque affixed to the back, reserved for the quiet ones who did it all without asking. Some stories don't need headlines to matter. They just need someone to see.